are about to take part in a time-traveling road trip through pop culture. A road trip with a clear destination and many stops along the way. This is but one act of one chapter of the serialized journey.
So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now is your chance to, well, we've warned you.
I'm not speaking to you.
When we last left off, we concluded our deep dive into MST3K's 6th season with a small town in Texas carelessly wiped off the map, welcomed a divine intervention of El Santo, said a bittersweet goodbye to TV's Frank, and learned exactly how reverent one should be regarding the Academy Awards. But remember how we didn't discuss any of the main shorts featured during Season 6? Well, this week, we're playing catch-up with all the shorts you could ever want. From instructions on how to shower properly to the lonely, possibly mobbed-up life of a bread truck delivery man. It's an epilogue, chock full of depressing, non-professional actors and some of the most confounding life lessons ever given. As always, I am Ryan Rodriguez, and you were stuck with the Coolness Chronicles Season 1, The History and Legacy of Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Episode
Chapter 9, Top of the Basic Cable Mountain. Epilogue. Salute your shorts. If you want to know how dark the collective sense of humor of the MST3K writer's room could get, look no further than any short featured on the show. There's something about the authoritarian tone that usually accompanies something instructional or purportedly educational, something constricting and big brotherish that brings out a normal person's inner smartass. Especially if those instructions were established in the 50s and early 60s, a time when unquestioning conformity was hip and hip was stupid. Season 6 boasts a cornucopia of condescension, wide-ranging in styles, formats, and concepts. So let's get to it, shall we? Experiment 602, Invasion USA, was preceded by a short from 1950, A Date with Your Family.
The Woody Allen story.
Hey, I like my family as a friend.
Narrated by America's father Hugh Beaumont, Encyclopedia Britannica presents a seemingly pleasant dinner attended by the traditional white, heteronormative, upper-middle-class nuclear family. None of the participants appear to be actors and are all accordingly not given any audible lines, as if they've been forcibly placed on mute. And every family member's role during dinner time corresponds to what society deemed respectable. Dad's unwinding after a hard day of work, son and daughter are congenial and wearing their Sunday best, and mom cooked dinner because that's the woman's job.
Then helps mother to her chair as he would his best girl.
The less said about this, the better.
Yeah.
When eating dinner, it's not appropriate to bring up anything controversial, such as how you feel or how you see the world. Unacceptable topics will be dealt with electrical shocks to the genitals, and a sense of deep unyielding shame in the eyes of your loving God. Do you have something you need to get off your chest? Put it in your diary, you bleeding heart commie.
Napkins on the lap, the family awaits service. They converse pleasantly while Dad serves.
No, I'll just have
I
a
said
saltine.
pleasantly, for that is the keynote at dinner time. It is not only good manners, but good sense.
Emotions are for ethnic people.
Pleasant, unemotional conversation helps digestion.
I can't stress unemotional enough.
If you follow the steps outlined in the short, you are assured that your family will love you and respect you. Or at least that's what they'll say to your face. Now salute the flag and go to bed.
More gin pop?
Do you begin to see now how a date with your family can be a truly special occasion?
Do you?
Do you?
Why,
When Mom is cooking dinner, Servo notices a boiling pot and references our first detour of the week.
There's a rabbit in
does that sound
there.
exciting to you?
Let's leave the pleasantries aside and briefly discuss 1987's erotic drama Fatal Attraction.
A look that led to an evening.
We were attracted to each other at the party. That was obvious. You're on your own for the night. That's also obvious.
A mistake he'd regret all his life.
Where's your wife?
Daddy! Honey, oh, God.
And you're here with a strange girl being a naughty boy.
I don't think having dinner with anybody's a crime.
I've got to see you.
This is gonna stop.
No, it's not going to stop. It's going to go on and on.
She keeps calling the apartment.
Hello?
Every time Beth answers the phone, she hangs up. I'm scared, Jimmy.
You play fair with me? Do you have an affair with her? I'll play fair with you.
I don't want to lose my family.
How could you do that?
Now, you're scared of me, aren't you? You're afraid. Gutless, heartless, spineless.
If you ever come near my family again, I'll kill you. You understand? Daddy! I'm not going to be ignored. Alicia, where's Ellen?
She's gone.
Fatal attraction.
I guess you thought you'd get away with it. Well, you can't.
It's the charming story of a philandering married douchebag played by Michael Douglas, as if there's any other actor eligible for that part, and the damaged, dangerous, definitely bipolar woman played by Glenn Close that he brings into his life on a whim, who promptly dismantles everything he has. She stalks him and his family, kills his rabbit, endangers his child, and eventually tries to knife him for his mistreatment of her. Here's the rub, no pun intended. As a bipolar boy who is certainly aware of how women are frequently depicted as unflattering caricatures on film and television, I should hate this film. In fact, before viewing it, I always maintained that it was tawdry, cliched horseshit. But I can no longer say that, for I have finally seen it, and I fucking love it. Glenn Close takes a character that was admittedly thinly written on the page and gives her dimension. She couples menace with pain, rage with despair. She clearly did her homework and tried to be responsible with her depiction of an ill woman. Her threats also double as a clear cry for help that Douglas's character is incapable of heeding.
I don't know what you're up to, but I'm gonna tell you it's gonna stop right now.
No, it's not going to stop. It's going to go on and on until you face up to your responsibilities.
What responsibilities?
I'm pregnant. I'm going to have our child.
Alex, that's your choice, honey. That has nothing to do with me.
I just want to be a part of your life.
Oh, this is the way you do it, huh? Showing up at my apartment?
What am I supposed to do? You won't answer my calls. You changed your number. I mean, I'm not going to be ignored, Dan.
She is absolutely sensational. I saw some of my own issues in her, not the whole murdery part, but the excitement of misguidedly believing that someone cares about her. I know that. The mood swings, the self-sabotage, I can identify with that. Does it bother me that the only way I can see parts of myself in film are represented through villains and psychological thrillers? Absolutely. Ask me about the whole being abused makes you a schizophrenic arc in Raising Cain sometime. But I can tell that Glenn Close has sympathy for her character even when no one else does. She takes a real supervillain turn in the third act, but by then, director Adrian Lyne has crafted a tense roller coaster ride, literally at one point, that is so deft and so well made that he manages to turn an unanswered ringing phone into a ticking time bomb. My disappointment was, for once, exceeded by my interest. I don't excuse the industry's propensity to treat people with mental illness like unstable monsters with no inner life. But I like Fatal Attraction. And folks, if you're ever having an affair and your partner in crime starts ghosting you, please don't boil their bunny. That's a big no-no. Like texting and driving. Experiment 603, The Dead Talkback, followed 1954's The Selling Wizard. Brought to us by the good folks at Anheuser-Busch, pioneers of alcoholic delights and half-day amusement parks, the short aims to educate retail grocers how their brand-spanking new freezers can help them increase profits and make frozen goods sexier to the average American. And I do mean average. There's a level of extraneous information and patronizing narration that makes me wonder if people were genuinely dumber when this was produced, or if corporate culture just thought the general public were rubes. In it, a fetching mute woman with a magician's cape and a blouse made out of a picnic tablecloth, the titular wizard, presents a deconstruction of the basic sales and mechanical components to refrigeration. Want to know how to make your shelves attract the human eye? The answers are here.
I'll take it, I want it. Gimme.
And notice how these convenient horizontal wire shelves put your product always within buying range.
Give it to me.
They may be removed entirely for loading to full cabinet capacity.
But don't put your tongue on it.
Don't know the ins and outs of how air is made cold? Worry not, citizen. You'll be informed soon enough, and in fetishistic detail to boot.
can we see how forced air automatic defrost makes this the most advanced open-top automatic salesman ever made.
Are they allowed to show that?
Because this was produced in the era before videotape, I can only imagine countless workers falling asleep to the dulcet tones of the narrator, unable to fast forward. It's like an episode of How It's Made, but without the basic level of interest directed at an audience of none. Experiment 607, Bloodlust, was bonded with 1960's Uncle Jim's Dairy Farm from the good folks at Jam Handy, a frequent supplier of shorts to MST3K and an educational film source not to be confused with the Democratic state senator from Maine or the Olympic swimmer of the same name. Believe it or not, Uncle Jim's Dairy Farm tells the story of two kids from the city who are sentenced, given the opportunity to spend their summer at a dairy farm owned and operated by Uncle Jim. Hopefully it's their uncle. Otherwise, those parents have some splaining to do. As the parents drive onto the property and approach the main house, the inhabitants of the Mystery Science Theater take note of the ominous, Zapruder-like vibe of the photography.
Here in frame 54, Mr. Connolly is struck by the bullet.
No wonder they're all so excited.
After the kids are dropped off, the parents haul ass and presumably celebrate the greatest summer of their adult lives, stripped of the burden of meddlesome children. We then follow the kids as their cousins walk them through the gauntlet of chores and mundane delights that is farm life. Milking cows, climbing ropes, feeding pigs, sorting grain, tending crops, waking up at ungodly hours, it's a non-stop thrill ride of responsibility and humble stoicism.
So this is enough to get you up in the morning, huh? Okay.
So, cities, nightclubs don't mean anything to you,
George
do
and
they?
Andy help.
Whoever edited the short probably picked up on the humdrum lack of energy communicated by the footage shot, because the music is often so cheerful that one wonders if it was borrowed from something more festive and holiday-centric.
One foggy Christmas Eve, Santa came to say...
James Kitten loves to drink his milk.
Aw man, don't you wish you were watching Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer instead? Experiment 608, codenamed Diamond Head, was accompanied by another short from the fine door-to-door salesman at Encyclopedia Britannica, jumping backward in time 2 decades previous to 1947 for A Day at the Fair. Specifically the Indiana State Fair, where every attendant looks like an extra from the Beast of Yucca Flats that was left on the cutting room floor. Ordinary people that were clearly not prepared to have a camera pointed in their face, just going about their lives and walking through exhibits that celebrate the best of Indiana, like corn.
Here in the grain show, Mr. Olson is watching while the judge decides which farmer has the best corn.
I'll pay you. Come on, pick mine.
The judge feels the weight and shape of the ears.
It's all done behind protective chicken wire.
Then he looks at the evenness of the rows of grain.
Yes.
And the size and shape of the kernels.
Oh, my, yes. That's nice. Oh.
But surely none of the corn is quite as fine as Mr. Olson.
Don't tell your mother we've been here, son.
It's time for lunch.
Let's go eat something gray.
There's also more exciting fare, like flying machines.
This is a jet plane.
Where's the corn go?
Wonder what it would be like to fly it.
Over Cambodia, secretly maintaining plausible deniability.
Here is a tractor.
You heard it here first, dear Hoosiers. Run, don't walk, to your nearest time machine and visit the 1947 State Fair. The corn awaits. Next up is a short from 1956 that ran before Experiment 609, The Skydivers, and asks one of the most important questions man has ruminated over since our species evolved from the primordial ooze. Why study industrial arts?
Because you're bad at math?
No students' arms were harmed in the making of this film.
Herc Harvey, who later graduated from industrial filmmaking and directed the cult favorite horror movie Carnival of Souls, made this sobering look into the virtues of undervalued blue-collar labor for the Centron Corporation, the one educational film producer whose name sounds like a genocidal robot that menaces the Avengers. Are you missing grainy, gray, greasy close-ups of oily, pimple-faced teenagers in uncomfortably short shorts in your life? Look no further, you sad soul you. Your proverbial ship has come in.
This is the film the boys had to watch, and the girls had to go to the gym and watch the other film.
You'll also learn about the modern world's dependence on brawn, the jobs that keep our society from literally falling to pieces, and the strange fixations that come with them.
And you know I like the feel of a board moving smoothly against a sharp saw.
And I thrust the nail into the soft-yielding wood.
I like the smell of fresh wood chips and sawdust.
I put them in my underwear.
The bright glare of a welder.
I like to sneak in and lay on the table saw.
The sharp whine of a power tool.
The piercing scream of a freshman.
It turns out that shop class isn't just the period where you construct balsa wood CO2 drag race cars or draw diagrams of open circuits under the instruction of an underpaid civil servant with anger management issues. That last part may be my experience personally. It's where you learn skills that you can use to truly make a difference, unless someone else is more efficient.
I could probably make another in about half the time.
Still, your Mexicans do it real cheap.
The job market is a harsh place, but if you pay attention and shop, you can be anything you want, especially if what you want involves tools.
Tool operators. And mechanics.
In what's becoming a regular staple of the genre, the people recruited to act out the lessons imparted here are not actors, which provides realism and awkwardness.
And Joe, we'll need scores of men who can translate and build those ideas on paper into the actual homes, churches, schools, and factories of the future. We'll need engineers.
I don't trust my wife. Made phone call for her.
Carpenters.
We'll need actors, people who can read lines with and interact with others.
Workers.
And make sure that you adhere to proper safety precautions. You don't want to end up like Crow.
Oh, hey, Crow. You sure you can handle that thing?
Piece of cake, Mike.
Well, just make sure you observe all the proper safety precautions.
Safety schmafety.
Hey, you wearing your goggles?
Yeah, who needs them?
Oh, what happened?
It's just a scratch. Hey, what do you think of her? She's a beaut, huh?
Hey, Bird Brain, you forgot the best part.
What did you do?
Well, ask him. It's his fault. Is not, is to, is not, is to.
Industrial arts. Because the future belongs to the skilled.
Perfect. There.
Sidebar. Crow is cut in half in this scene, and actually interacts with both halves. The effect of Crow being cleaved in two, and both halves getting into an argument, is one of the most impressive feats of puppeteering ever featured on the show. End sidebar. The next short is one of the longest featured on the show during Experiment 610, The Violent Years. It's a typical of the era declaration that this is a world where a woman's identity is defined by the attention they receive from men. Edison Electric's Young Man's Fancy from 1956. Our protagonist is Judy, a teenage girl with very low self-esteem. Why? Because everyone in her life seems to relish every opportunity to ridicule and sneer at her.
Oh, there's a special message for you.
I loathe you.
And be sure and tell Judy to keep her grimy little paws off of my friend. He's got no time for babies.
He's not Jerry Seinfeld.
Despite all the verbal and emotional disrespect she receives, Judy manages to be almost impossibly adorable. She's like an apple-cheeked Lena Dunham without all the horrible. But the object of her affection, her brother's friend Alexander Phipps, is more interested in electrical engineering and the wonder of household appliances. Alexander is a fool, because Judy is a swell gal and he doesn't deserve her. To add insult to injury, Judy is convinced that if she forces herself to develop enthusiasm for Alexander's interests, she'll catch his eye. So she uses the appliances at her disposal to cook him a dinner instead of seeking an interior life and finding her bliss, because it's the 50s and agency is considered radical.
Perfect dinner, Judy.
That's what you should have cooked.
Said she couldn't boil water without burning it.
You're a damn liar.
Pineapple juice, chilled just right. And that ham steak, oh, brother.
Take me.
Creamy potatoes, buttered lima beans, and that wonderful cherry pie with whipped cream. All right. I think we ought to make him eat all his meals at Hamburger Harry's for that.
I'm not kidding. This is really exciting to me.
You could do so much better, Judy. Like me. Just saying. Next up, Experiment 613, The Sinister Urge, was coupled with a short that educates kids about something their negligent parents already should have done. 1956's Keeping Clean and Neat. Did you know that when you get dirty, you're supposed to wash off that dirt using soap and water? It's true! I only know this because the narrator told me so.
In the 50s, people responded well to authoritative, disembodied voices.
The fun never stops when you're clean and tidy.
Also, your nails should be clipped, your clothes laundered, your shoes shined, and your hair brushed. I cannot stress that last part enough.
Before you put on your dress, it's a good idea to brush your hair. Be sure you've washed your brush. Don't put a dirty brush on clean hair. Brush and brush and brush. At least 100 strokes.
Just keep brushing and saying the name of our Lord and Savior.
You may still need to get help from your mother on this.
She's getting ready for her date with Jerry Seinfeld.
You may remember that back in Act 7 of this chapter, we discussed Experiment 616, Racket Girls, but stopped short of detailing the host segments. That's because they were directly inspired by that episode's short, 1950s coronet presentation, Are You Ready for Marriage? Meet Sue and Larry, two kids and atrocious actors who are absolutely devoted to each other even though they've only been dating for 3 months. Larry proposes to Sue, but her parents will not give their blessing. She still has to finish high school, and he has 2 more years of college to suffer through. In order to convince Sue's folks that the two should be allowed to elope, she and Larry visit their church's marriage counselor. Sue and Larry are not very bright. The counselor, Mr. Hall, who looks strikingly like a young Clancy Brown, possesses the true knowledge of any sentient human's fitness for marriage. Cupid's checklist. Do Sue and Larry have all the requirements necessary for wedded bliss? We'll learn the answer shortly, even if they're completely unprepared for the cosmic wisdom about to be imparted upon them.
Well, we're the ones that are getting married. That's your folks.
I hate you.
I don't know, Larry.
I'm really mousy.
First up, do they have similar backgrounds?
Similar basis for your ideals and standards.
Pure bloodlines.
Your standards and ideals.
Your Zephon Wars from Beta
Larry,
3.
you distinctly...
Do we agree on our religious beliefs?
I worship
And have the
Cthulhu.
same feelings about religion in general?
You know, God and stuff.
Do we have...
Are they real friends? Do they understand marriage? All signs point to a mild maybe. Then Mr. Hall breaks out the big guns, a complex metaphor that compares a healthy relationship to something reductive and simplistic, a rubber band.
If you're too far apart psychologically,
If one of you is cuckoo,
if your backgrounds are not similar enough, it can cause a great deal of argument and unhappiness until it's gone.
Where'd it go?
That's what you've been saying about your romantic love. If these other things cause a breakup.
But where's the rubber band?
Sir.
If the rubber band, and therefore the coupling, is stretched too far, it could snap. Or as Mr. Hall puts it, go boing. The kids heed this dire warning and decide to spend the summer reviewing the 3 bullet points of Cupid's checklist. The marriage is postponed, and everyone learns valuable lessons about elasticity.
Now do you think we have anything more than boing?
Why, yes, I think you've made a good start towards getting ready for marriage.
But never make light of boing, son.
Boing, everybody.
Boing. Boings all around.
God bless us, everyone. At least 2 souls were profoundly affected by the short's message, namely Thomas Servo and Crow T-Robot. In the episode's second segment, Mr. T-Robot nervously asks for his current parental unit's blessing.
Mike, I would like to ask you for Servo's hand in marriage.
sure, I don't see why that... Whoa! What? Did I hear you right? You want to marry?
Tom Servo.
Why?
Well, hey, I'm not getting any younger.
It's a sketch that took many takes to successfully pull off and is responsible for one of the show's best bloopers.
I would like to ask you for Servo's hand in marriage.
Sure, I don't see why that would... What?
Well,
Why?
yeah.
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 Yeah. We're
Well-
gonna have sex, Mike, in a big way.
Mike is skeptical about the potential union and decides to use that month's issue of Cosmo to give the bots a spin on Cupid's checklist.
You know, as a matter of fact, there's a compatibility quiz in this month's Cosmo. Why don't we start
A
there?
quiz in Cosmo? How unusual.
Huh? All right, here it is. Okay. Who do you admire more as a father figure, Bill Cosby or Marvin Gaye Sr.?
Bill Cosby.
Marvin Gaye Sr. Okay, admittedly, he was a little strict.
It turns out that they are ready to tie the knot, and as they prepare for nuptials, Crow and Mike spend segment 3 having a bachelor party with Jan and the Pan doing a striptease from the neck juices up. Then in segment 4, the ceremony. Crow is in a tux with his net turned backwards, and Servo is naturally the bride, dazzling all those in attendance with a glorious puffy white gown. Frank serenades the lovely couple with an acoustic rendition of Peter, Paul, and Mary's wedding song. Tourists in Deep 13 provide an audience, and Dr. F officiates the whole deal.
There is love. There is love.
I love you guys.
Lemon tree, very
Frank,
pretty
Frank.
and
Thank you. Now, we are gathered here today to get through this thing called life. Electric word, life. It means forever, and that's wrong speech. Here we are, yes. Marriage. The coming together of two to make one.
But before anyone can say I do, the ceremony breaks out into a wrestling free-for-all, and order is restored to the satellite of love. I've really been looking forward to this week of the podcast because my two favorite parts of Season 6 just so happen to be shorts. Both are well-intentioned but completely misguided, and both feature more mean riffs than you could ever possibly imagine. Let's get into the second best of the two, from Experiment 618 High School Big Shot, 1954's Out of This World. We begin with that episode's first segment, in which Forrester sends a chemistry set through the umbilicus to tempt Mike and the bots to pervert the laws of nature. Crow quickly conjures a potion that has drastic results.
Hey, cool chemistry sets.
Hey, I know. Servo, drink this.
Okay. Here we go. Kind of a minty sort of pig. I
Servo, what have we done? Servo, is that you?
Servo kill?
No,
you don't like Servo?
I do.
No, we like Servo. It's just that Servo no kill. No,
don't touch Servo. Don't touch bad. Don't touch Servo.
Mike struggles to carry the supersized Servo into the theater, and our short begins.
There are those who would say that the story which follows could happen only in a dream.
Movie bad.
Regardless of where it could happen, this is the way it did happen.
Movie go away.
The story involves Bill Dudley.
Thankfully, the potion quickly wears off, and things go even further off the rails. How is this possible? When you think about the eternal power struggle between the forces of light and dark, the age-old philosophical and ethical give and take between God and the devil, the last thing you probably associate with the supernatural mishigas is bread delivery. But the good folks at DuPont Chemicals would beg to disagree. According to DuPont, up in the clouds there is a version of Mount Olympus by way of a clerical office. In this office are two entities that couldn't be more different. The cynical, flamboyant, horn-sporting Red, who sees the worst in humanity, and his opposite, the angelic Whitey.
Hey, Whitey!
Both are curiously interested in the productivity and professionalism of a random bread truck driver / delivery man, and Red presents a challenge.
Suppose an attractive young lady were to ride the route with this Bill Dudley. Say she's a magazine writer and is after material for an article. Say she makes fun of the way he works.
Say I'm starring in Forever Plaid.
That's all it'd take to get him back into my way of selling again.
You think so, huh?
I'm willing to bet on it.
So Whitey goes to Earth posed as a newspaper journalist to chronicle a day in the life of a delivery man, because the real headlines are found in unexpected places, and serve as the stealth angel on his shoulder while Red stalks around in various disguises, hoping that the driver's moral fiber will erode.
Well, that's how Whitey started out to prove her point. But Red was not far behind.
That's how Whitey keeps us down.
Hey!
Whitey and the driver make stop after stop, and the driver educates her and, by association, the audience on how to properly display and handle bread in a retail grocery environment. With each new scene, Mike and the bots impose increasingly dark characteristics on the driver, turning him to a lonely, aggressive, violent psychopath with mafia ties.
Anyway, today I go after a grocer's goodwill a little different. I'll show you.
Watch me commando a grocer.
Come on, Mr. Marco.
Come on.
Just putting the salmon balls away.
Mr. Marco, you want my coffee ring today? Sure be a shame if something bad happened to your store here.
How are you today?
I'm a feel lousy.
No, I'm sorry to hear that.
Because I like you, Mr. Marco.
Hey, something new.
Be a shame if this ran over your kid.
Hey, these are pretty slick.
You noticed that, eh?
Sure did. Yeah, I bet your customers will go for them, too.
With my customers, maybe yes and maybe no. We'll see.
Go on, you know doggone well they will.
Okay, they will. Don't hurt
Be right
me.
back. Here's something else a fella can do to get plus volume. Watch me in here.
Oh no, run! I can't believe I had to waste him.
You didn't have to shoot him in the face.
Sometimes I want to put a bullet in my skull.
The short makes its point clear early on and just keeps hammering any subtlety to death, which eventually becomes exasperating.
And Easter cakes at Easter time.
Funeral breads, war breads.
Displays that suggest ideas for all types of entertaining.
Okay, we'll buy the bread.
The driver is practically perfect at his job, a model of excellence that has every base covered. In essence, he's the man you should be but could never live up to. You make me sick.
Slip up?
You coming on to me? Sure, I'm just as human as the next guy. That's why I keep these bullseyes handy, so that a small slip-up doesn't turn into a big trip-up.
Oh,
Well, off to the races. What do you say?
Make sure you stock your truck up so that you don't, well, you know.
Servo even begins to wonder if there isn't a touch of the divine in the driver, fitting the short's more fantastical elements.
It's going to turn out the bread truck driver's Jesus.
Whitey naturally wins the bet as the driver's integrity is unassailable, and when Red is faced with defeat, the actor playing him, possibly realizing that this is the only performance he will ever give on film, goes all out.
Grosser goodwill, plus volume.
Fey acting.
Displays.
In the end, good triumphs over evil, and bread is successfully delivered and sold, but Red knows that there will be other delivery men in the world, and he's always paying attention.
But from now on, I'm gonna keep a pretty close watch on these guys.
Especially when they're showering.
I cannot stress enough how perfect this short is for riffing. It's one of the show's finest moments, and I thank Whitey every day for its existence. Experiment 619, Red Zone Cuba, was coupled with a short that serves as a prequel to Season 3's Earth vs. the Spiders, Speech Using Your Voice, 1949's Speech, Platform, Posture, and Appearance. Here we're privy to some serious introspective thought that doesn't seem to reach its point until long after you've lost interest.
Now just suppose you were a beautiful doll with rosy cheeks and big blue eyes.
Okay.
A doll that never talked.
Just do what he says.
Or a tree that basked in the warm sunshine and rustled in the breeze. A tree that never spoke.
Now you're a can opener, metal and shiny and taciturn.
Or suppose you were a spring flower, contrasting your gay colors with the blue sky.
I'm not a flower.
You know how you would be judged? You'd be judged mostly by your appearance, by the way you look.
By the kind of car you drive.
Appearance is the basis upon which a little girl chooses a new doll.
I like this one because it's whiter.
A man's prosperity is often judged by the appearance of his home, and thus is man himself judged.
Yes, that's Eisenhower's America.
Yes, appearance is important.
There. I said it. I'd say it again if I had to.
It also rehashes the central premise of Posture Pals, also from Season 3, and includes such helpful bon mots as standing up straight will make people respect you, and walking tall will increase your self-confidence, even if you're a 4-foot-tall weenie. It's one of the many MST3K shorts produced in conjunction with Young America Films, accompanied with one of the greatest logos, an ominous-looking eagle with an eye that looks like a star and sickle if you squint your eyes.
Eye posture is good. Eagle.
Experiment 621, The Beast of Yucca Flats, is the only episode of the Mike era to come packed with two shorts. The first is 1951's Money Talks, about a teenage boy who learns about the values of itemizing, budgeting, and saving his income with the help of everyone's favorite source of conventional wisdom, the ghost of Benjamin Franklin. And at least in the Mystery Science Theater, Franklin doesn't tolerate any sass.
You have one important thing to learn, and then you'll have no problem. You must learn how to manage your money.
What money?
Don't smart-mouth me, boy.
You've a point there, son.
This short is probably the most useful that we'll cover in this hour of the podcast. You don't need to learn how to climb a rope in a barn or how a freezer works, but spending money is always a subject I can use some advice on, even if it's outdated thanks to inflation. And that old cliche of famous specters doling out inspiration.
Suppose you decided to have a budget. How would you start?
Well,
With lots of money.
the first thing I would do is to estimate my income.
That's right. Figure it out. By the week, in your case.
Shouldn't take long to estimate 50 cents.
Estimate?
You'll remember these few simple rules, William. I'm sure that you'll find it very easy to stay out of the red.
Dead people have too much time on their hands.
Oh, and kill your parents. Bye.
The short also leads us on our final detour for Chapter 9, as Mike turns a close-up of a quarter boasting Franklin's profile into a reference.
Thank you, Mr. Franklin.
For making us laugh about love again.
Benjamin Franklin was tried in the 8th Circuit Court on stalking charges. In a minute, the results of that trial.
Let's discuss the linchpin of the Jack Webb extended universe, Dragnet.
The story you are about to see is true. The names have been changed to protect the innocent.
Jack Webb was a powerhouse. In 1949, he began a radio show for NBC based on his experience working a bit part on a film with an LAPD sergeant and consultant Marty Wynn that tried to depict the literal procedure of a beat cop's daily life, Dragnet. Webb portrayed Sergeant Joe Friday, a flat, no-nonsense civil servant who took his job more seriously than any cop seen before in fiction, and with his assorted partners, solved cases inspired by real events from Wynn's life on the force with none of the baggage and forced dramatics that typically came with the genre. Webb saw the LAPD as unsung heroes who did shit work for long hours, little pay, and high injury rate, and has mostly been depicted in fiction as shifty or corrupt. Sidebar, they probably were. End sidebar. To make sure that his show placed cops in a flattering light, he tirelessly collaborated with the department, went on countless night patrols, made regular trips to police headquarters, and even attended police academy courses to make sure that his jargon and knack for detail was on point. Dragnet was as close to a documentary as fiction got, even if it was slightly skewed in one direction. If you were looking for any insight into the controversies of the LAPD, like segregation, you're shit out of luck. Every bit of minutia of the cop life was depicted, which could either make for riveting drama or tedious homework, and it launched a venerable brand that would continue for decades. He led the radio show for 9 years, but 2 years into that long stint, Webb adapted the series for television, and not much changed. The series was visually different than virtually everything else on the air, implementing almost claustrophobic close-ups, camera angles that strayed from the norm, and location shots wherever possible. But other than that, it was still two very serious cops encountering subjects and filing reports and talking. And explaining.
9:35 p.m. We got in the car and drove Mrs. Sterling downtown to the city hall. We took her to the squad room, called a police stenographer, and we began to take her complete statement. One of the first things she did was to admit full responsibility for the series of shopliftings which had been going on for over 2 months. She told us that her kleptomania, the urge to steal things, had started with her as far back as her junior high school years. She admitted as a girl she stole books, tablets, pencils, pieces of chalk, and as she grew older, it seemed to get more serious with her. It carried over into her college years, and that's when her stealing first got her into trouble.
It was when I joined this sorority. It was just like high school. I was all alone. Oh, we had a lot of clever girls in our house. Some of them were smart, some of them were pretty. All of them seemed to be doing something except me.
Webb didn't bother to make Joe Friday more lively for the transition to the small screen, and by holding back, established a persona that would follow him for his entire life, cementing a character that still resonates as the prototypical TV cop. He's not psychologically complex or nuanced, he's just a man doing a job at peak efficiency. He's the embodiment of what he sets out to do. Every week, Friday and his partner would get an assignment, question potential suspects, eventually finger a suspect, and the audience would be informed of the suspect's arrest, trial, and sentencing. The partner wouldn't do much aside from occasionally frowning or shaking his head at the suspect in disapproval. It's a formula for sure, but one that clearly worked. It ran for 276 episodes, all directed by Webb, across 8 seasons, eventually leaving the air in 1959. But you can't keep a good cop down, and when the 60s reached its height, Webb brought Joe Friday back to television screens for Dragnet 1967, or 68 or 69, the title would change every year, with the ever-dependable Harry Morgan as his partner Bill Gannon. The only difference between this new iteration was that their daily grind was now in living color, and Morgan's character had an actual personality.
11:59 a.m. We waited.
All units concerned. Outpost 1 reports a white 1966 Mercedes sedan, license George Adam Nora 589, has pulled into Vincent driveway. A woman carrying a briefcase or a small suitcase has entered the residence.
You know, we didn't count that money.
Yeah, I know.
Wasn't time. Something else, you didn't sign for it either.
What do you mean I didn't sign for it? Why didn't you?
It's your baby, Joe.
I know, but partner, remember, it's 5050.
I sure wish we'd counted that money and you'd signed for it.
Scintillating. Though times had changed since '59, Friday refused to give in to the mores of the time. In fact, he decided to use his newly regained platform to tackle the day's most sickening scourge, recreational drug users, or as I call them, my people. Webb also used this new Dragnet as the anchor of a shared universe, using his production company, Mark 7 Limited, to co-create Adam 12 in 1968, which is basically the same show confined to a car, and Emergency, about paramedics, in 1972, both of which occasionally intersected and crossed over. Webb would create one more show unrelated to the Dragverse, a name that he likely wouldn't have approved of, a western called Heck Ramsey, and in 1982 was working on a new Dragnet for the 80s, but passed away at the age of 62 before his vision could be executed. But that doesn't mean that the decade was bereft of Joe Friday. Later in the decade, Superman screenwriter and Richard Donner's secret weapon Tom Mankiewicz made his directorial debut on an homage/parody of the flagship series. Dan Aykroyd is Friday's nephew Joe Friday in Dragnet, 1987.
This is the city, Los Angeles, California. 465 square miles of constantly interfacing humanity, representing every race, color, creed, and persuasion. But God, no matter how he is worshipped, chose in his infinite wisdom to deposit here in the cultural nexus of the Pacific Rim. Almost 4 million people work and play here, and like any other place, anywhere, there are those who have it, and those who want it. Those who have it, enjoy it, no matter how they got it. Those who want it can get it by attempting to better themselves in a sympathetic community populated by decent citizens cheering them on. Or they can try to take it the easy way. Because even in the City of Angels, from time to time, some halos slip. That's where I come in, doing my job to the best of my ability on a daily basis. I work here. I carry a badge.
If you've seen the Brady Bunch movies, you'll be hip to the line that Mankiewicz is straddling with this remake. Aykroyd's Friday is practically a time traveler, dressing, speaking, and behaving like Jack Webb just stepped out of 1959 and into a temporal void, then quickly acclimated to his new surroundings without altering his personality. Harry Morgan returns as Bill Gannon, now LAPD captain, and assigns this new Friday a laid-back, wisecracking partner in Tom Hanks's Pep Streebek. Together, they unwrap a vast conspiracy involving evils that Webb himself would be proud to tackle, like pornography and pagan cults. The movie is essentially about Streebek's quest to remove the stick from Friday's ass, with varying results, and it's actually pretty good. The last third is nowhere near as entertaining and clever as the first two-thirds, but I can understand why it has a pretty solid cult reputation today. Aykroyd, who I usually have difficulty embracing, is absolutely perfect here, nailing Webb's jargon, delivery, and mannerisms to a T, which makes every instance that his new Friday starts to lower his defenses or adapt to new situations incredibly endearing. Although he's essentially spoofing Webb, he does so with respect and admiration, like he's been waiting to play this character for years. Dragnet would be adapted for television twice more, in 1989 and 2003, but neither outshone or improved upon the movie. It's like an affectionate noogie, and I think Jack Webb would have cracked a smile at it, presumably for the first time. In 1947, 30 years after Puerto Rican citizens became U.S. citizens, the federal government collaborated with what's currently known as the Puerto Rico Industrial Development Company to form a series of projects called Operation Bootstrap. Bootstrap aimed to transform the Puerto Rican economy from agrarian to industrial, moving away from the traditional reliance on sugarcane plantations to establish factories and provide labor for U.S. companies at costs below the mainland average. Though initially successful, by the 60s unemployment was increasing, and despite rising wages and living standards, competition from rival countries had become serious. In 1973, the Economic Development Administration of Puerto Rico produced the second short featured in the Beast of Yucca Flats episode, Progress Island, USA, which was a fine example of too little too late, and my favorite part of Season 6. It's a brilliantly awful piece of propaganda that treats Puerto Rico not as the unofficial 51st state, but as a beautiful vacation spot where real Americans better get used to being outsourced to.
Within this building is the heartbeat of that economy, the Economic Development Administration, which has achieved remarkable progress through industrial growth.
Here comes the hard sell.
Operation Bootstrap, a pioneering program for self-help developed by the agency, has created an investment environment which attracts industry from around the world.
You mean cheap labor?
The short is overflowing with what I like to call button riffs, which is when someone in the theater takes a sentence fragment or short declaration and adds a few words to make a positive attribute into a negative one. For example,
I'm having a freak out up to 10 years later.
An An American democracy.
Would be really great.
Bilingual schools.
Bisexual students.
There's also an abundance of the theater inhabitants ending a scene by declaring something in unison, not unlike the end of the opening theme for Season 5's Mitchell.
This is Puerto Rico. Progress Island, USA.
Oh, when did they change the name?
A Quinn Martin production.
Puerto Rico. Progress.
Puerto Rico is an indoor playground, too. There's non-stop excitement, both night and day.
In Las Vegas and Atlantic City. Gambling.
Every joke is mean but completely deserved and delivered with breathless abandon. No one is left unscathed, no gut punch overlooked.
Pharmaceuticals that demand the highest standards of quality and control.
When Judy Garland died, it destroyed Puerto Rico's economy.
The Spaniards named it Puerto Rico.
Because they couldn't think of anything else.
Today, we call it
Cheap Laborville.
Progress Island, USA.
Because we have no regard for history, culture, or tradition.
We would like to apologize to all the people of Puerto Rico that we did not offend. Bye-bye.
It is the key example of a perfectly constructed riffing machine operating at peak performance and giving you a new laugh before you've even finished your last one. I've seen it twice as many times as I have the main feature, and I will keep watching it until someone from Shout Factory pries the DVD from my cold, dead hands. And if I could have one wish granted regarding MST3K, I would forgo my desire for a remastered director's cut of the MST movie for a vinyl record of the soundtrack to Progress Island, USA.
Woo! Hitman!
A band concert under warm tropical skies.
The music of John Philip Salsa.
For the people here, the quality of life is being fulfilled with each coming year. It has formed a continuing pattern of progress that all started more than a quarter of a century ago.
A century ago.
In the beginning,
We don't know what this is, folks, but it's definitely Puerto Rico stuff.
one of the most important operations on Progress.
Glorious. The last short of the season is easily the most troublesome and depressing. Unlike Out of This World, Mike and the Bots don't need to lift a finger to make this one dark. It provides all its own misery. From Experiment 623, The Amazing Transparent Man, Union Pacific Railroad presents a religious diatribe about the reckless incompetence of their own workers, 1955's The Days of Our Years. First, some historical background. George Union and Samuel Pacific were two hedonistic globe-trotting millionaires who met for the first time in 1862 when, by bizarre fate, they were violating the same unfortunate soul at one of those creepy eyes-wide-shut orgies. They finished their activities and decided to pool their resources together and get into the transportation industry to capitalize on exploitable Chinese labor, creating the most famous railroad in American history. That railroad's name? Amtrak. Oh, I have fun. The Days of Our Years opens with a church choir playing beneath a title card that incorporates the imagery of stained glass and immediately starts quoting scripture and soberly framing its miniature narrative around Christian ideology.
A church, complete with ministers saying the proper words.
You are getting sleepy.
But before you have a minute to mournfully wonder what it was like to be a Jewish employee of Union Pacific, you're told 3 instances of worker incompetence leading to ghoulish death and disaster, and none of the cautionary tales are the result of the company's own malfeasance. For instance, a man slowly races home with his co-workers in the back of his truck and is paralyzed for it while his passengers are unscathed.
They were along for the ride, whether they liked it or not. Liked it? They hated it.
Flag on the moon.
What could they do? They were trapped. Yes, Joe had a ticket, and he just couldn't get there fast enough.
For those 2 scoops of raisins.
Oh, not again, Joe.
I have no idea what that has to do with the railroad. Second, an old, out-of-shape man has health problems that none of his co-workers or supervisors pay any heed to, and he ends up having a coronary in the train cab, causing a derailment.
But now he had a job to do, and nobody was going to say George Price gave up on the job.
George Price gave up on a job. There, I said it.
They call him the derailer.
An expectant father is working the day of his wife giving birth. He decides to celebrate by handing all of his coworkers cigars, but forgets to use gentle pressure on the shoulder of someone using a soldering iron and gets a flame blast directly to his eyeballs and never gets to see his baby's face.
Yes? Yes? A boy. 9 pounds. Wow.
I've got great sperm.
You can forgive Charlie for being excited. Who wouldn't be? A newborn father is one of the most excitable people in the whole world.
Other than the father at the time of conception.
You can forgive Charlie for passing out cigars during work hours, even though he knew he should have waited till lunch.
He should have waited till lunch.
Absolvo.
You can even forgive Charlie for what happened next, for that one instant of final, fatal forgetting.
Alan Arkin.
Why am I welding? Why would I be welding with this? I don't know. Understand.
Whoa! You don't have to hold it there.
Not the film.
So the leading causes of accidents are joy, sex, and old age?
All of this is so artless and matter-of-fact that it increases the dread to an unbearable level, with the religious aspect coming off as rubbing salt in a wound. If you didn't understand depression before the days of our years, your reckoning is nigh.
The Lord has allotted them. Let not man, by his thoughtlessness, diminish the blessings of the Lord.
Ironically, the Reverend was maimed and crippled giving communion.
Reverend, I'm having a crisis of faith. What should I do?
Get safety goggles, my son.
Remember to worship at the railroad of your choice.
And that is where we end this little catch-up hour of the Coolness Chronicles. Next time we'll start up a brand new chapter all about Season 7, and, as importantly, the filming experience that broke the spirits of everyone involved and led to the righteous anger that permeated the entire season. There is so much to discuss, from the box office potential of stripper bounty hunters to weird ideas for syndication, and ultimately that one time that the show definitively ended, only to emerge on a new network with new priorities. All that and much, much more as we continue to chart the history and legacy of Mystery Science Theater 3000. Thank you to everyone involved in making MST3K for everything they've contributed to my life and culture as a whole. Double thanks for writing the episode guide that I will quote frequently in this season of the podcast. I also want to thank Shout Factory for their excellent supplemental material that was invaluable to my research for this and every episode to follow on this subject. If you want to support the artists who made this wonderful work, many episodes are available on VOD at rifftracks.com. And thank you for listening. If you enjoy what you hear, please rate and review the show on iTunes or your chosen source. Share it with anyone you can, any way you can. This has been the largest and most fulfilling endeavor I've ever seen to completion, and it would be nice to keep making the show until it just isn't fun anymore. Have any questions or comments, or is there anything I missed on this particular chapter? Send an electronic letter to thecoolnesschronicles@gmail.com, contact me at Twitter, at CoolnessPodRyan, or on our Facebook page, and keep on the lookout for updates. A little heads up for our regular listeners, The Coolness Chronicles is becoming a bi-weekly podcast with new hours every other Tuesday. On our off weeks, there will be little mini-sodes, so no matter what, we will always have something new for you. It turns out that this show is relatively difficult to write, produce, and edit on a truncated schedule, and since this is an independent production and the only person on staff is myself, this is the best possible course for action for the show's continuation. I hope you'll stick around, because like that Pepsi slogan from the 60s, this podcast still has a lot to give. And also like Pepsi, a vendetta to execute. Until next time, do what you love, don't be a dick, and as always...
Why, Lisa? Why?
Please, officer, man. Their job. To enforce the laws. Their job. To enforce the laws. Enforce the laws. To enforce the laws. Their job. To enforce the laws. Just the facts, man. Just the facts, man. Just the facts, man. Just the facts. Dragnet. Enforce the laws. Enforce the laws.
The Coolness Chronicles is written, produced, and edited by Ryan Rodriguez. Executive producers are Tracy Rodriguez and Luis Rodriguez. Original music by Bildschirm. Please visit bildschirm.bandcamp.com for more information.